Good morning. So today I'm doing a video to review the new Art Pro series from Axis. On this side of me I've got the Art Pro 1201, and on this side of me I've got the rest of the range which have just been released: the 1121, the 1051, the 1001 and the 951. Now there is a reason why I've separated the 1201 from the rest of the foils, which I'll go into in just a moment. But first of all, a little bit of background might be useful. The Art series of foils, Adrian originally developed to be a very high performance, very user-friendly, high aspect foil series. He always knew that he was capable of designing a series of high aspect foils that were much higher performance, and that's what he's done. As such, the Art Pro series doesn't replace the Art series. The Art series is still the high aspect range that people would need when, like, their first introduction into high aspect foils, or if you're very early on in your foiling journey. The Art Pro series are a big step up in performance. They really are. They're separated by other performance characteristics, which I'll deal with in just a moment. But yeah, make no mistake, the Art Pros here on this side of me are a big step up in performance, even from the 1201. The 1201 is different. That's why I've separated them out in this shot. The 1201 has got an amazing low end as well as a pretty damn good top end. And for a big foil, I think that's super important. But the rest of them, they are definitely lacking in the same bottom end that makes the 1201 so easy to use. Now the 1201 is all about, I think, a really good range balance between its low end and its top end. Now if my left hand here represents the low end in this position and my right hand here represents its top end, then it's got a pretty big range. For the rest of the Art Pro, I'm going to bring my low end hand up to here, so it's not got such a good low end, but I'm going to also move my top end hand over here, because these Art Pros are all about the top end. They really are. And I just wanted to do that analogy. Look at the range that the 1201 has. Well, the other Art Pros have got just as big a usable range, but it's much more biased towards the top end. These are fast, super fast. Their glide is absolutely unbelievable. They are so smooth with that speed. They are so controllable because they are smooth and efficient. Their glide, their speed, it's crazy good. As such, they do have a higher stall speed, but I'll deal with all of that because that's not necessarily a negative thing. You've got to accept that if you're going to have high performance in the top end, then the low end is not going to perform as well. But like I say, that's not a negative, and the reason is, or at least my way of thinking is, because the Art Pros are so fast, their speed is so good, their control at speed is amazing, they've got effortless glide, they are so smooth, they never seem to max out, they are so well behaved at speed. And because of all of that, they're so easy to keep up within the speed range that they need before they stall. Now yes, if your skill levels aren't good enough to be able to keep in that top speed range, then you are going to stall and you're probably going to have a very frustrating time. Which is why I think, like I said before, the Art series are much more suited to people earlier on in their foiling journey, or who haven't quite got the skill level to be confident with using any range of foils constantly in their top end. But if you have got that level of skill, you will find the Art Pros very easy to deal with, because they're so smooth, they're so controllable. Their pitch is just so forgiving. Control at speed, like I say, they never seem to max out. They just absorb all of that speed and give you feedback, gentle feedback in return. Carving, they're so well behaved when carving. Even changing direction, they are very well behaved. In terms of maneuverability, they've outperformed my expectations. Even the 1121, which is a big wingspan really, is a lot more maneuverable than I was expecting. In terms of its roll axis, so toe to heel, that sort of whipping from side to side real quickly and easy to change direction, is a lot better. I think that'll take people by surprise about how good that is. Control through calves is phenomenal. I think because of the straight median line that Adrian has put into the entire range, as he did with the Spitfires, gives them that real forgiving nature, that stability, whatever you're doing with them. They're very balanced, very pitch stable, very easy to control through calves, very easy to control when you're changing direction, if that's slowly or quickly. Everything about them is smooth. They are very, very nice to use. And don't forget, this is all at a very high level of performance, so that's where you need that level of control, and the Art Pros gives you that control at speed, at that top end. Other performance features, their wingtip breaches, like the Spitfires, are so not a problem. As long as you've got a bit of an angle to the mast, and the foil comes out of the water obviously at an angle, then you'll barely notice them. In terms of pumping, as long as you can keep the speed up, they pump ridiculously well. Now, because of their speed and their glide and their efficiency, they're actually a lot easier to keep their speed up than you think. And when I first started pumping them, I was a little bit disappointed, but then I realized that it's all about the speed. And I've almost had to change my pumping style a little bit just to focus on keeping the speed going. And once I dialed that in, wow, they pump so nicely, they really do. They're not a fan of turbulent water. They do better in smooth water, what foil doesn't. I think they deal with turbulent water better than the Art series, but not as well as the Spitfires. Prone foiling and subfoiling. If you like high aspect foils for surf foiling, these will rock your world. They are so fast, but they are so controllable. They are very maneuverable. Wingtip breaches are just not a problem at all. For me personally, most foil surfing, I prefer the Spitfires, but if I'm on that sort of low, fast-moving swell, then yes, I would definitely choose the Art Pros, because their speed and glide and maneuverability with it, control at speed, is just exactly the sort of feeling that I like when I'm riding those fast-moving rollers. Okay, so I'm going to talk about winging with the Art Pros now, and I just want to make it perfectly clear that when I'm talking about downwinding now, I'm talking about with the wind wing, not sup or prone downwinding, which I'll deal with later on, because I think they're very, very different. So with a wind wing, for downwinding, the Art Pros are amazing. I cannot imagine a better foil. They're so fast, glidey, smooth, efficient, but they turn so well, and they've unlocked just such a high level of performance for me when I'm winging. Whereas I would normally use the Arts, and I would love them, don't get me wrong, but these are faster, these are smoother, and in terms of wingtip breaches, I was always a little bit cautious when using the Arts, in case I breached a wingtip, but that's no longer an issue whatsoever when I'm using the Art Pros. I just crank it as hard as I like, without any worries of that sort of nature at all. Now, which size foil and when? Well, as a rough comparison, I would use the 1121 when I would normally use the 1099 Art. I would use the 1051 when I would use the 999. I would use the 1001 when I would normally be using the 899, and I'd be using the 951 in place of the 799 Art. Now, it's not quite as simple as that, because they feel very different to the Arts. For example, I would use the 1001 in place of the 899, but because the 1001 obviously has a higher wingspan, it does feel different. The 1001 actually sits somewhere in between the 999 and the 899, really, for winging anyway, because it's not quite as easy to use as a 999. It doesn't pump the same. It's not quite as easy to pump. There isn't the same solid platform beneath your feet when you're pumping, but my goodness, it really has got the same performance range as the 899,
being almost as easy to use as the 999. And they really are very different to pump as well. Rather than pushing down on a solid platform, you are having to pump them like much smaller foils. That's how they behave. You need to keep yourself very light on your feet and concentrate on keeping your speed up. If you can do that, then you can actually pump them forever. They are absolutely amazing at pumping. Just spring up rather than pushing down and keep light on your feet.
Prone or sup downwinding with these Art Pros is technical. I'm not using the word technical as a negative here, but I've got to say that they're not as easy to keep going and to use for downwinding as, say, the Spitfires or even the Arts. I think because of their high speeds, they are very well suited to that much faster ocean or ground swell rather than wind generated swell. If you've got consistent conditions, then even wind swell is fine. But if you've got turbulent conditions, unpredictable conditions, then personally I've found them quite difficult to downwind in those conditions. I do stall out quite a lot. It can be frustrating. I've used the 1051 and the 1121 for prone downwinding, and it's another level of downwinding for me. Even having used the Arts, you can't really relax. At least I haven't got my skill level with those foils in those conditions to the point where I can relax. It's all about constantly anticipating when to pump, or at least if you leave it a split second too late, you've lost speed and possibly stalled. If you're not constantly reading the ocean and being aware of where you've got to go next, you'll lose speed and possibly stall. But if you like that high octane, high thrill, challenge of absolutely pushing it constantly, and that challenge of, yeah, I'm gonna foil in that way, then these are just amazing. They will not bore you, put it that way. Now, in the right conditions, these are going to be downwinding weapons. They really are. And if you've got the skill to keep your speed going, and you've got very good ability to read the bumps and anticipate of where you've got to be at all times, then I don't think you'll find a better downwinding foil. But if you're still learning to read the ocean swell, if you're misreading the swell and relying on the low end of a foil to get you through the downwind run, then these are probably not going to be right for you just yet. If they are right for you, you will break records. You really will. They are so fast. I mean, in the right conditions, with really long sort of period swell, and you're going to get long glides, then that's great. But if you've got short period swell, I think it just makes it very difficult. They're not the ideal conditions for the Art Pros. Short period swell, I'm using the Spitfires. Long period swell, I'm using the Art Pros. That's prone or sup downwinding. Like I said earlier, for winging, when I'm downwinding with a wind wing, I will always use the Art Pros because it's so much easier to just keep your speed up by pulling in on the wing whenever you need that little bit of extra boost. Okay, in terms of rear stabilisers, which work well with the Art Pro series? Well, personally, I think that the progressive range and the skinny range of rear stabs work equally well. It just depends what style of riding you prefer. The progressives will give you a much more reactive roll axis. The smaller ones I would recommend from the 300, the 275, maybe even the 325. By the time you get to the 350, it really is getting a little bit draggy for me. And I think that the Art Pros perform better when they've got a fast rear stab to suit their preference for speed. The 300 or the 275 are my favourites. By the time I get down to the 250, I find that it's too much of a handful in terms of pitch. Now I think that's the stab, not the foils. The 250 seems to be very hard for me to control in terms of pitch, no matter what foil I use it with. But I think that's just my level of skill. I'm not quite ready for the 250 for anything apart from wake foiling, which is just super consistent and predictable anyway. The skinnies, okay, so similarly like the progressives, I think all of the skinnies work really well with the Art Pros, but when you get down to the smallest one, the 35, again the pitch is a little bit of a handful at times, and you know, if your skill level is high enough, it will be an amazing combination, but be prepared for a little bit of mayhem if you're not quite ready for it, like myself. It took me 20 minutes of a downwinder before I stopped falling off literally every 20 yards because of the insane reactivity of the skinny 35. Once I dialed it in, it was a very intense ride for the rest of the downwind run. I made it, thankfully. I'd never gone this fast. So yeah, only for the brave, works, but challenging. My favourite skinny with the Art Pros seems to be the 45. It's a good all-rounder, very fast, very good manoeuvrability, super controllable through carves, pushing. I mean, the Art Pros love to carve, they really do. So they suit the skinny stabs very well because both of them means that you've got a nice controlled aspect to your carving, and there are very few sudden surprises. Whereas with the small progressives, I can find that if I'm not being super on it in terms of control, or the water's a bit turbulent, then carving I can, you know, make mistakes because they are so reactive. Unless you control that reactivity that they've got, then it can end up in you being punished. So there we have it. I think that's pretty much everything I need to say about the Art Pros. If you've got any questions, give me a shout. I'll do my best to answer. Otherwise, please try them. They are so worth it.